this is, just to clarify there, it's quite nice to have the overview of Agile at the very beginning, and then we've got Scrum and Kanban, which we'll talk about now. Kanban isn't the opposite to Scrum, as some people have said to me in the past. So I don't want to create any arguments with Andy. Where's he gone? So in many cases, actually, you see Scrum as being used as a process, and then Kanban's actually been used underneath the hood. So we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through. So what is Kanban? It's two things. And the first one is uncovering the visual process flow that you go through in order to deliver software from start to finish. And then secondly, you implement some work in progress limits on the flow to go through to make sure you don't get some chaos going on. And that's where it ends. So it's a very simple, easy to implement system. You want to try and manage your flow by, as I said, by introducing those work in progress columns. I challenge you on this little question here. If you take it back to your teams tomorrow, if you were to ask anyone in your team to independently write down what the process is in order to deliver software from start to finish in isolation, and see if they all come up with the same process, I'm going to guess that you'll all get slightly different answers on how it works, unless you're using some form of visual cueing to find out how process does travel from A to B. I've tried it myself on previous places, and it's actually very interesting. You get some seriously devolving processes, but we didn't do that, we didn't do this, we did do that. So I think Kanban's a really good process to make sure that you understand what is your process from start to finish. So how do you go about it? This is a very simple Kanban board, and for those of you used to belong to lean coffee sessions, this will be quite familiar to you. It's probably a little bit basic, but it does solve the problem. It solves the problem that you need to understand what you want to try and deliver. You've got a doing column, which is the bit in the middle, and then you've got stuff that's done. But notice that the visual cues on this is very visual. So you've got different post-it note colours. These are not requirements, but they are useful to have as part of it. So in this case, the red might be a bug, the green might be a user story feature, the blue might be some operational thing that you have to do with it as well. And zooming into one of those cards, if you have a look at it, there's some sort of description of what you're going to try and deliver. You've got a tag on there of who's responsible for that delivery. You could have one or two names on it, depending on how you want to run your system. So the dot in the bottom right-hand corner, again, another cue that there's some problem or it's blocked. But you get the impression here that the idea is that you start with what you know. What do you know your process has right now? So if you know that all you're doing is you've got a backlog of work, you need to start delivering that work, and once you've delivered it, you're done. That's the simplest form. Quickly though, teams tend to end up with something which looks a little bit more like this. So again, I'm focusing pretty much on software delivery here. But this is quite traditional. I think you'll see this kind of Kanban board on most teams that use it. And what you're really trying to do is you're trying to understand your process such that when you start measuring it, you can find out where in your process are you not seeing a nice flow. So Scrum is very much about time box sprints. I start at day one, I've got 2 weeks to deliver my sprint, you put some work into it, and then you start going. Kanban is a similar type of process, but it's a pull type system rather than a push type system. So as you move through it, you have to make sure that you're not putting more work into the system than it can actually handle. So let's, one thing that's missing from this that you might have seen on boards actually is an expedite row. I've left it off, but there are occasions, as I'm sure you know, where some fancy VP comes along and said, I need it now. So it goes into a queue and it sort of moves its way across the board in an expedite row. It's a similar process, it's just you're focusing your attention on that row to push things through. So I would suggest that for those of you that do have a backlog, we've got a to-do column there. I've seen some anti-patterns where they fill that up with an entire backlog of stuff. Probably not the best thing to do. So I think this is akin to what Andy was saying before. It's a volume of work which you know you need to do right now. It's in your immediate scope or vision. There's probably loads of stuff off to the left-hand side of the board that you're not interested in yet. So maybe thinking about the sprint ready type idea, this would be a good thing to have in your to-do column, things that you know are well prepared, you can deliver them successfully, and you're not sort of guddling around trying to work out, I don't really understand what this is, I'm not sure whether I can move it to the next column or not. Now, work in progress is one of the key items in here, and if anything like some of the teams I've worked on, you fill up the columns, you might have, say, there's a maximum of 2 things you might allow in the planning column, so we're now full. It's not uncommon that people go, yeah, I don't really like the look of them, I think I'll just pick up another to-do item and stick it into the column and off I go. And very quickly your system unloads. So I think that's one of the keys of Kanban, to make sure that you don't feel the temptations, you just do stuff. There's a lot of Gene was saying, there's a lot of do. We want to really try and focus on outcomes rather than activities. So really making sure that you stop starting, start finishing your work. So that's it, right? We're finished. We've got Kanban boards. Not quite there. There is a wee bit more to it than that. And one of the key things I think is measurement. So in a sort of, this is an example of how the board might look over time, and as it moves through, you're not really looking for a traditional kind of burn down type chart that you might see in Scrum, where you've got X number of story points and it burns down. Kanban's a little bit more interested in something called continuous flow that's going through the system. This is the diagram you see here is an almost perfect continuous flow diagram, that everything's nice and smooth, and that's really what you're looking for as you move through it. I'm going to contrast that for something else which doesn't look quite as smooth, and this is more likely what will happen. This is great because you're really beginning to understand the flow through your system. Where are the problem areas? What is it that's happening at a particular stage in your process that you need to probably rip that apart, maybe stick more columns in, try and understand what's going on, why is it slowing down here and then suddenly accelerating again. It's based on the principle that any type of delivery can only go as fast as its slowest moving part. So without going into sort of theory of constraints, it's based very much on that. And you want to try and understand exactly which one of those processes are the ones that you need to hone in on to make some sort of improvement. So when I look at a graph like this, I would look at the area where I'm seeing a sudden spike. So I'm going to assume here that the green is done. For whatever reason, the first part of it, the 3 or 4 days worth of stuff, nothing's getting done, and then suddenly there's a massive spike. So what happened just before that that's caused that? And maybe one way of looking at that is to work out how you're going to measure stuff. So there's two key measurements that, well actually there's a few more, but the two key ones I think are important to understand in Kanban are lead time and cycle time. So lead time is the amount of time that it takes from when a customer asks you for something, when do they get it pushed back out the other side, and then your cycle time is once you actually started work on it, how long does it take you and your team to push it through the system and deliver it. So those two key metrics are really what Kanban's all about, and it's trying to understand that throughput. Brilliant for predictability. VP stakeholders will come to you and say, how long is it going to take you to deliver X? They're really asking for a lead time. I'm going to put something into your queue. How long do I have to wait to get this back out the other side? And then cycle time is much more about your team. How can you understand the processes that your team are using? What are your bottlenecks? Where are you going faster? Where are you going slower? How can you make that part faster? You can't make the income faster. You're not in control of that, but you can make your team faster. So the cycle time is something that you should be looking at. Predictability, getting team efficiency, I've talked about that. There is another one called tact time, which tends to be seen a lot less, and it's really about the rhythm at which you need to deliver, sometimes akin to sort of supply and demand. So there's no point in delivering stuff way faster than you need to supply it, you're just going too fast. So if there's something you can do in there to adjust the speed that you've got through, that's something you would look for tact time. So how do you translate that to some of your graphs? It looks a bit complicated in here, but actually once you understand it, it's fairly straightforward. So cycle time is going from you can actually measure cycle time between any 2 points. Typically it's measured between when you start things and when you've delivered them. But if you are interested in the amount of time it takes to get between your developers and your testers, because there's something going on there that they have to be checked, or you have to get hold of maybe a test rig. Something I've seen before is it goes into test, it sits there for ages, and then it jumps back out the other side. The problem in that case was that they were waiting on a test rig becoming available, because they could only actually test one thing at a time. So that's a good cue there to maybe stick your work in progress for your test down to 1, or maybe introduce a separate column that you've got waiting for test rigs, so you can really understand how long do I sit waiting for this before I have to move to the next one. Can we get 2 test rigs, 3 test rigs, do we need more testers? So what's the key thing that's actually slowing your process down? And that's what you're looking for in these graphs. So they do look a little bit cryptic and a bit psychedelic, that one actually. So you're wanting to try and spot the difference between 2 points. So to read this graph properly, you'll see that it's trying to measure the horizontal axis, in this case between the purple and the kind of orangey colour at the bottom. Is it the same up there? Yeah, it's good. And that's where, when they've actually started the work and when they've delivered the work. So as you step up, you should expect to see those things shortening if you're getting faster as a team, or lengthening if you're getting slower. And lead time, you're just extending that back out to when you first received the work. And the last one, I just wanted to compare Scrum and Kanban. So we've said beforehand that they're not competing systems, they're very much complementary systems, I think. So I'm not going to read them out, but I think the key difference, I think, in here is about measuring flow versus having the time box sprints. So I'd focus on them as a main takeaway. If there's something you want to do to deliver stuff quickly, where you want to get up to speed very quickly, there's no roles, responsibilities, we don't make any assertions of having a product owner or a scrum master, organisational changes, none of that's prescribed inside Kanban, which makes it a very quick and easy system to take on board. And because you're just measuring flow rather than velocity, again, you can estimate, it is common in there, but you're less interested in that kind of burn down chart approach. You're much more interested in throughput, cycle time, and beginning to understand where your bottlenecks are. So I deliberately went through that really quickly on the premise that we can maybe have a bit more of a discussion, see who is using it, who isn't using it. Secondly, we're probably running pretty low on time. So yeah, any questions, thoughts, concerns? Just before I end on that, is there anyone using Kanban? No, it's a different question. Who has never used Kanban that was interested in starting to use Kanban? Is the question that I had. Couple, right, okay. And using Scrum at the moment, or right, okay. Right, I'm going to leave it at that. I deliberately went a wee bit faster than I should have done for time reasons, but any questions I'd be happy to take.